I'm going to read to you from his book that unfortunately I've read. Off the court, I didn't have a minute to spare. Cultivating an endless capacity for work, I took the maximum 18 credit hours a semester. I also found a full-time job to offset the cost of books and expenses, as well as any extracurricular activities I might pursue that my aide didn't cover. My mother had made it clear she wasn't supporting another do-nothing man in the house. My job at Barnes & Noble's bookstore in Midtown Manhattan started every weekday morning at 8:30 a.m. Like many other Hollis commuters, that meant the following routine: wake up at 6 a.m., shower, dress. I want you to zero in on this, and if you've never been to New York City, maybe you won't understand how crazy this sounds. Or if you've never lived in a major city, you won't understand how crazy this sounds. I'm gonna reread it. Except for a half-hour lunch break, I was on my feet until 4 p.m., helping one customer after another. I then raced across town to fit from 48th Street and 5th Avenue to 28th Street and 8th Avenue to make the team's 4:30 p.m. practice. Anybody from New York, hop in the chat, hop in the comments, call me, email me. You go from you're in New York City, and at 4 p.m. you get off from work. You go across town, and you're ready for a 4:30 p.m. basketball practice? Stephen A. Smith and I are the same age. We would have been athletes at the same time. He got held back a year, so he's a grade behind me, but we're the same age. And I played football in college. He's a legend. He played basketball in college. You can't go across town in New York in 30 minutes and be ready for basketball practice at 4:30. But if you read this book, because I'm not going to get to everything in this book, it's crazy. Then he says, after nearly 2 hours in the gym, it was another sprint to make my classes each weeknight from 6:30 to 9:20 p.m. After class, I retraced my morning route back to Hollis, walking through my mother's front door at 11:30 p.m. Whatever homework or studying I couldn't fit in during lunch or break or weekends, I did then. I'd eventually fall asleep, wake back up at 6, and do the same damn thing all over again. When I first read this book, it was so farcical, and so I was like, hey, what's going on here? Who authorized this? Who's writing this? Who thinks this is believable? The next thing Smith alleges is that his sister's friend or boyfriend or somebody, this is after he mysteriously quits the Fit basketball team. And by the way, I've talked to one of Stephen A. Smith's former high school teammates who graduated with Stephen A. Smith in 1986, who told me, Stephen A. Smith rode the bench in high school and talked his way onto the team and wasn't any good and, was like 6'1", 140 pounds and begged the coach to be on the team. And again, Stephen A. Smith says it only lasted a few months. He allegedly failed one class. But this guy played on the next year a competing junior college team that would have competed against this Fit team. And he's like, Stephen A. wasn't there. And so Stephen A. would argue like, yeah, I quit the team. I don't tell you why, but I quit the team. And so Stephen A. then argues that he played a month or two of high school basketball and never really played. He played a month or two of junior college basketball and never really played. And then somehow in February of 1988, a former Winston-Salem State basketball player puts him through a playground workout in New York City. A playground workout in New York City in February. Check your weather calendar. February, New York City. Stephen A., according to his book, is going through a playground tryout. He's going through a workout with some guy that played at Winston-Salem State years ago on an outdoor playground in New York City. He wants us to believe that. And the guy is so impressed that he's like, oh my God. Stephen A., next weekend, this is according to the book, I'm going to come pick you up and drive you down to Winston-Salem, North Carolina for a tryout with Big House Gaines. I'm reading this and I'm going, holy cow, who is serving this up and who is believing it and why? Why would someone tell these kind of lies? So he writes in the book, the next weekend, the guy comes and picks him up on a Saturday. They drive all day to North Carolina, check into a hotel, and on Sunday wake up and show up at a Winston-Salem State basketball practice that was already going on. A scrimmage. Just think this through. And because I went and looked, it's February. I go check Winston-Salem State's basketball schedule for the 87-88 season. When, this is happening in February of 1988. This covers the 87-88 season. Winston-Salem State, like virtually every other college basketball team during that era, played a basketball game on every Saturday of February. So Stephen A. is saying that Winston-Salem State, at the end of their basketball season, when they're preparing for their conference tournament, and maybe trying to qualify for the Division II postseason tournament, that they play a game on Saturday. He wakes up the next morning, they're having a scrimmage that he arrives to late in the middle of, and Big House Gaines checks this 6'1", 150-pound guard from New York City who played a couple of months of high school basketball without acquiring any stats or anything, played a month or two of junior college basketball without acquiring any stats or anything. He shuts down a practice, checks Stephen A. Smith into the scrimmage, and then, according to Smith's account, he knocked down 17 straight shots in the scrimmage. And Big House Gaines offered him a full scholarship immediately after the practice. I'm reading this, and when I read it, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. This is a comic book.